I still had the letters in my coat when she said my name. Not loudly, just enough to stop me. We were standing where we shouldn't have been, the air thin, the room too quiet for what was about to happen. My fingers tightened around the paper, creased soft from years of being folded and unfolded, like something I kept checking to make sure was still real. She looked older. So did I. When she finally spoke again, her voice didn't shake the way mine would have if I'd tried. She said, "That day took," and then she stopped, like the rest of the sentence had weight. I realized then I had been carrying more than letters all this time. I had been carrying the moment she never finished. Before everything broke open, my life was narrow in a way I didn't question. I worked regular hours, came home before dark most days, cooked simple meals, kept the same routines because they asked nothing from me. People called it stability. I called it quiet. The kind of quiet that settles in your bones and convinces you it's enough. She entered that life without ceremony. No dramatic beginning, no lightning, just a shared table at a friend's gathering, our knees touching once, then not moving away. She laughed softly, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to take up space. I noticed that first, the way she apologized for things that didn't need apologies, the way she listened with her whole face. We didn't rush. That's what we told ourselves. Long walks instead of dinners out. Conversations that stayed just shy of the dangerous parts. When she spoke about her past, she left gaps, and I didn't push. I was proud of that restraint. I thought patience was the same thing as care. She wrote letters even when we were seeing each other every week. Real letters, folded paper, ink that smudged a little where she'd stopped and started again. She said it helped her say things cleanly. I told her I liked it. The truth was, I liked having proof she'd existed in my hands after she left. There was always a sense of borrowed time. We never named it, but it lived in the pauses. She had plans that didn't quite include me. I had habits that didn't make room for her. Still, we kept choosing each other in small ways. Coffee left on my counter. A scarf forgotten on her chair. The illusion of permanence built out of minor sacrifices. The day everything changed didn't announce itself. No warning, just a shift in tone. She arrived quieter than usual, sat across from me without touching her drink. When she finally spoke, she said there were things she hadn't told me yet, things she thought she'd have more time to explain. I remember nodding, too quickly, saying I understood, even though nothing had been said. That was my mistake. I thought understanding meant waiting. I thought love was something that could be deferred without cost. After that, the letters kept coming. But she didn't. Each one careful. Each one stopping just short of something essential. I told myself she was protecting me, or herself, or both. I folded them back into my coat pockets, drawers, books. Years passed that way, quietly. With paper doing the talking, neither of us could finish out loud. By the time I saw her again, I had convinced myself the past was settled. That whatever we hadn't said had dissolved on its own. I didn't yet know how wrong that was. The day it broke open wasn't dramatic. It didn't look like a turning point while it was happening. That's what unsettles me now. She asked to meet in the late afternoon, a time that felt temporary, like neither of us intended to stay long. We chose a small place we'd never been before. Neutral ground. Her idea. She arrived early and didn't stand when I came in. That should have told me something. Instead, I smiled and reached for the back of the chair like we were resuming something paused, not something already slipping away. She didn't touch me. Not hello, not even her fingers brushing mine by accident. Her hands stayed folded around a cup she wasn't drinking from. She said my name once, the way people do when they're about to ask for permission. Then she told me there were things she needed to say out loud, because writing them down had started to feel like lying by omission. I remember the exact sound of the room then, a fork hitting a plate somewhere behind me, a laugh from the bar, life continuing at a volume that felt disrespectful. She told me about the other life pressing in on ours, not another person, something heavier. A responsibility she hadn't chosen but couldn't refuse. Family, duty, a promise made before I existed in her world. She said she'd hoped she could carry both without dropping either. She couldn't. I waited for the part where she explained what that meant for us. I waited long enough that the silence began to stretch. That was when she looked at me, really looked, like she was memorizing damage. She said, "I can't keep pretending this ends well." I asked if she was leaving. I asked it calmly, like the answer was negotiable. She didn't respond right away. She reached into her bag and placed a folded envelope on the table between us. "I wrote this last night," she said. "I don't trust myself to say it all correctly." That was the moment, the real one. Not her words, not the explanation, the envelope. I didn't open it. I don't know why. Pride, maybe, or fear that once I read it, the decision would solidify into something with edges. I told her I'd read it later. I told her we could talk more. I told her time was something we still had. She shook her head, slow and tired. "This is the talking," she said. I realized then that I had misunderstood the nature of the meeting. I thought we were clarifying. She was concluding. When she stood up, finally, she hesitated. Just a second, long enough for me to believe she might sit back down. Instead, she leaned in and pressed her forehead lightly against mine. No kiss, just contact. Something private and unfinished. "I'm sorry," she said, "for the way this will linger." Then she left. I stayed long enough for the cup in front of me to go cold. Long enough for the staff to start watching me. I slid the envelope into my coat pocket without opening it. I told myself I was choosing not to know yet. I didn't understand that by not opening it, I had already chosen something else entirely. After she left, nothing in my life collapsed the way people expect it to. That was the first lie time told on her behalf. I went to work the next morning. I answered emails. I stood in line for coffee and nodded at strangers. On the surface, everything held. Underneath, something had shifted its weight and never settled again. I didn't open the letter that night, or the next. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment, as if grief required good lighting and a cleared schedule. The envelope stayed in my coat pocket for days, then weeks, until I was afraid the paper would start to show its age before I did. More letters came, not often, not on a schedule, each one arriving just as I started to believe the silence meant closure. She never pressured me to respond, never asked if I'd read the first one. That restraint felt cruel in a way I couldn't name yet. My replies were careful, shorter than hers. I avoided conclusions. I wrote like someone trying not to disturb a sleeping animal. I told her about small things, work changes, weather, books I was reading. I never asked when she'd come back. I never asked what had really taken her away. I thought that was respect. Looking back, it was fear dressed as maturity. Months turned into years quietly. That's the most dangerous kind of time. It convinces you nothing urgent is happening, while everything important is eroding. The letters became objects more than messages. I learned their weight. The difference between paper meant to explain and paper meant to confess. Some I read once and folded away. Others I reread until the creases softened. None of them crossed the line I was waiting for. None of them finished the sentence she'd started that day. People asked about my personal life. I learned how to answer without lying and without telling the truth. I said I'd known someone once. I said timing had been complicated. I became skilled at understatement. Every so often, I'd take the letters out and line them up on the table, as if order might reveal something I'd missed. Dates, handwriting shifts, a word she used more often near the end. I treated them like evidence, not memory. I told myself this was processing. What it really was postponement. I built a life around that gap. Not dramatically. Just enough that it couldn't collapse on its own. New routines. New faces. Nothing deep enough to threaten the center I'd left untouched. I thought I was being careful. I didn't realize I was preserving a wound. The first envelope, the one I never opened, became heavier than the rest. It followed me through apartments, cities, seasons. Sometimes I'd check just to make sure it was still there, like it might leave on its own if unattended. I imagined what it said more times than I can count. Sometimes it was kinder than reality, sometimes harsher. In every version, it ended things cleanly. That was the fantasy. An ending that behaved. Then, years later, I heard her name spoken in a place I didn't expect to hear it. Not said to me, just said near me, casually. Like time hadn't passed at all. I didn't turn around right away. I already knew. The body knows before the mind is willing to follow. When I finally did, she was standing there, older in the way life makes you, not in the way fear predicts. Real, unfinished. Looking at me like she hadn't expected relief to be the first thing she felt. That was when the weight shifted again. We didn't hug. We didn't fill the silence quickly. She asked how I'd been, and for the first time in years, the question felt dangerous. We agreed to talk. Not then. Not there. Another time. As if we were still people who could schedule things safely. That night, I took the first letter out and placed it on the table. I sat with it longer than I ever had before. My hands hovered over the fold. I realized I was no longer afraid of what it might say. I was afraid of what it would make undeniable. Still, I didn't open it. I put it back in my coat. And with that small, familiar movement, I felt the last of my careful distance begin to fail. We met a week later in her apartment. Not a neutral place this time. Somewhere lived in. Books stacked where they'd been abandoned. A window that didn't quite close all the way. Proof she'd been continuing while I'd been preserving. She watched me take my coat off. Watched me hesitate before hanging it. She knew. Of course she did. "You still have them," she said. Not accusing. Observant. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice yet. We sat across from each other with nothing between us. No cups, no table buffer, just knees, close enough that movement would matter. My hand went to the inside pocket before I'd decided to do it. Muscle memory. Years of it. I took out the first letter. The paper was thinner than I remembered. The edges soft, worn by my own indecision. She inhaled when she saw it, like she'd been bracing for impact this whole time. "I think you should read it," she said. "Now." I almost said no, almost suggested later, almost reached for the old delay that had protected me so well. Instead, I unfolded it. I didn't read silently. I don't know why. Maybe because silence had done enough damage already. Her words were steady, clearer than her voice had ever been with me. She wrote about the day she'd started to disappear, about the responsibility she hadn't named because once named, it would demand everything. about choosing the path that would cost her the least number of people, even if it cost her the most herself. Then I reached the line she'd never finished out loud. That day took my ability to choose you without destroying someone else. The room didn't react. No sound cue. No dramatic shift. Just me, holding a truth that finally had shape. I lowered the paper. My hands were shaking now. Hers weren't. "You could have told me," I said. Not angry, just tired. "I did," she said softly. "You just kept giving me time." That landed harder than anything in the letter. I folded the paper once, carefully. Then I stood, crossed the small space between us, and placed it back into my coat pocket. Not hiding it, just returning it to where it had lived. "I can't carry this anymore," I said. "Not like that." She nodded. There were tears then, finally. But they didn't change anything. I took off the coat, laid it over the chair, left the letters inside. When I walked to the door, she didn't stop me. That was the sound of it ending. The click of the latch. The quiet certainty that some things, once set down, don't belong to you again. I didn't feel lighter right away. That's something people don't say enough. Letting go doesn't arrive with relief on schedule. It comes with absence first. For weeks, I reached for the coat out of habit. Not to wear it, just to check the weight. Each time my hand came back empty, my body reacted before my mind caught up. A brief, dull confusion. Then, nothing. I never went back for the letters. Not because I was trying to be strong, because going back would have meant reopening a version of myself that only knew how to wait. Life adjusted in small, practical ways. I changed where I walked in the mornings. I stopped pausing when I passed places that could have been ours. I learned that memory fades faster when it isn't fed ritual. Sometimes I thought about her reading those letters alone, wondered if she recognized how much time they had occupied, if she ever noticed the space they left behind. I didn't follow the thought far. Some questions aren't meant to be completed. What stayed with me wasn't the loss. It was the realization. How easily I had mistaken patience for devotion. How postponement can masquerade as kindness while quietly choosing for everyone involved. Years later, I can say this without bitterness. She didn't take something from me. We both participated in the delay. We both agreed, in different ways, to let time do the deciding. I still remember the feel of the paper, the sound it made when unfolded. But the sentence that once held me no longer asks anything of me. It belongs to the past now, not resolved, just placed. And that, finally, is enough.